what do you pass on? How can you help other people? It's sort of like at the end of your life, you know, you start going to church again. Well, at this stage in my life, I'm starting to try to help people with their careers and try to find niches that I can pass on to other people. So one of the things that I was looking at was, okay, you know, what would be a good subject? And I sort of came up with this, and there's reasons why I came up with it. Topic selection. You know, first of all, I wanted something that was relevant for today. You know, and one of the things that I always look at, I've been a businessman for many years, and I've done pretty well. You know, in Atlanta, had a company down there. We moved to Atlanta. We saw the Olympics were coming. There was 5 of us got together. We started a company, and within 2 years, we went from 5 people to 2,800 full-time people and 600 contractors. So you can move fast if you spot the opportunities and the trends that are out there. Of course, you know, within 3 years after the Olympics was over, I sold everything out because work was done, you know, as you know, the Spurs in Atlanta. So anyway, one of the things I started looking at was major trends. Trends identify changes that lead to opportunities. You know, and the opportunities can enhance the current role or help to change job roles and careers. The reason why I find this is a lot of people, you know, that I talked to tonight at the previous meetings, they are actually in career changes. They're moving into a BA because they're sick of programming, or else they've been a school teacher and they hate kids and they want to go and do something different, and all sorts of reasons. Changing, and change is near and dear to my heart. I started off as a medical technologist, a medical microbiologist. I moved to a physician's assistant pathology, you know, and you know, it's nothing like on TV. You have the CSI, nice warm apartments, and the body is still, you know, in good shape, you know, and in real life it's 2 in the morning in a cornfield at 10 degrees, you know, and the head's over there and the arms over. So anyway, I got tired of that area. I moved into medical computing. From there I went to work with a company called EDS. Those are the ones that taught me programming and the old COBOL, ALC, JCL, all that stuff. And they started moving up into client server also. So my whole career has been change, 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 change. My philosophy is I don't care about a gold watch. You know, my dad worked for almost 50 years in the same job and got a gold watch. My attitude is I'll make a change. I'll go buy my own gold watch. You know. So anyway, so it's good to hear that people are looking for change and moving other things. So in the trend I was looking for changes. And the changes that I'm specifically looking for today, even though people look at me like say, well, you're a project manager, or you're this, or you're that, I really have more of a kinship for business analysis. To me, it's a better career. You have more satisfaction. How many people are PMPs in here, project managers? You know, you get hammered every day. People hate you because of the schedule and the cost. You know, one issue after the other. With the BA, it's a little bit different. It's not, I won't say it's an easier job, but I have much more satisfaction from being a good BA than being a good PMP. So anyway, so one of the things I started doing was looking for opportunities based on a trend that is currently happening today. And by the way, everything I talk about, and generally you will be aware of that's out there. It's a matter of packaging it to a different viewpoint. So, what is the trend that we have today? And again, some of y'all may be familiar with it. That many large software vendors, you know, we're talking IBM and Computer Associates and Cambar, all the big guys, Oracle, JDF, all these guys that are selling large systems are now starting to provide a solid methodology and documentation templates to direct and protect their implementations. Interesting concept. A lot of people are familiar with materials that large vendors put out, but these are becoming more robust and more intense, and it's focused on what they're trying to install, and there's reasons for that. And the resellers that are selling, like you have a lot of people, right now I'm working with a Microsoft Dynamics ERP system, and Microsoft requires their resellers to implement their methodology. They don't give them a choice. They say, if you want to sell it, you have got to use our methodology. And we're going to take a look at that shortly. The trends, which is also good, indicates that vendors are getting more involved with large system projects than just the technical aspects of the sale and implementation. I used to be a salesman, which, that's another one of those things I'm still trying to say prayers over. But anyway, when I was a salesman, bang, I'd close it, I'd shake hands, and I'd say, let me know when the Christmas party is, and I was gone. The sales people are involved much more heavily than I ever was. And we're going to talk about what it is. And the implementation, the vendor is now, instead of selling it, loading it on hardware and saying, see you later, are involved very heavily all the way through. Now, why are the reasons for this involvement? And it's pretty interesting. I look at a lot of the business rags that come out from Microsoft and all the different ones. They have their newsletters, and they also have their annual statements where they meet in front of the board members, and they go over the bad news as well as the good. And if you looked at some of their finances, they have not done they didn't do quite as well. About 5 years ago it started. They attributed it to election changes, the economy and stuff like that, but they found out that they were selling as many systems as before. So they were really concerned because on the list of issues was they had failed projects due to customers. In other words, a customer would buy something and they had no clue how to implement it, but they were cheap, they didn't have the money, so they said, yeah, we got a guy, he just got out of high school last year and he's got a Macintosh at home. We think he can handle this implementation of an ERP system. So failed projects. And ERP systems, and again, we're looking at the bigger systems, not the smaller ones. We're looking at ERP systems with a 70% failure rate. 70%. Of course, now, there's a lot of definitions of failure. I've had some customers that no matter where they were at, they declared victory. Walked away like we should have done in Vietnam. Hey, we win, and then you walk out the door. But in reality, there's a lot of failed projects either because they didn't get it done or it was a bad system. They paid for a bad system that didn't really do what they needed it to do. Other things that were of concern, to the vendors was that reputations were getting hammered. Not just theirs, but the product as well as them, and the staff that was trying to implement it. So we've all seen companies where you go in, a few people there, you come back a year later and everybody's gone, like humanity. No, just kidding. And all of a sudden you go and say, where is everybody? And they say, well, I didn't do real well on that implementation, so we called K-Force up and they brought in another. So anyway, reputations suffer, and guess what happens? If you're a staff member and you get fired because some big company comes in and tries to implement software and it fails, are you ever going to recommend them? Mm-hmm. So that was another one of the real concerns that for the vendor involvements. Lawsuits and unpaid bills. Incredible number of lawsuits were occurring, especially with Oracle, because Oracle was actually selling their systems as anyone can implement these without any trouble, and they were having a lot of trouble. And unpaid invoices. If the system isn't right, you're not going to pay for it. So the vendors were looking at this, and audit culpability issues, they were also concerned because auditors now, based on investors, are going in and they're looking at companies and they're saying, well, let's see, you bought this system, it's not doing what it should be doing. According to Sarbanes-Oxley, you have failed to protect yourself and the vendor has ripped you off, so there's going to be a lawsuit coming from the investor side. And of course, the last one is business sustainability and survivability. Has anyone heard of Cambar software?
Cambar?
Cambar. And there's a reason you have it. Because 3 of the companies that they implemented their software in, did not sustain business. They went up. There's some other reasons. So the reason why vendors are involved is right there. Now, the vendors went out and they said, okay, let's get together and let's talk about this. And again, who are the vendors that we're looking at? We're looking at competitors of each other. Interestingly enough, you know, they met in San Francisco, and there was Oracle had a big contingent there, SAP had a contingent there, J.D. Edwards had a bunch of people, Microsoft was loaded. In fact, Microsoft actually paid for the symposium. And then there was a bunch of other smaller companies. They all got together and they said, we're having some industry problems, and we're getting some bad press, from all angles, including the federal government that was going, what's going on with these large software implementations? Because there's a lot of money. General Motors had 2 failed large ERP systems that they were going to try to put in just when they were having financial troubles. They owed millions of dollars for systems that had never been implemented. So these vendors all got together and they said, let's do an assessment and let's see exactly what's going wrong. Let's rule out the economy. That was the first thing that went out the door. Everyone, oh, it's the economy. Was not the economy. They sort of broke it down into these numbers right here, and I sort of come there. They actually had 20 items. A lot of them were the duplicates, so I just lumped them into these right here. One of them was this right here: bad habits due to sloppy management combined with fuzzy management expectations. You had companies that, because they had an IT department, and everybody been there for at least 20 years, they're damn good at it. We don't need anybody from outside. We'll handle it. And by the way, we also need a project manager because everyone down there knows what they're doing, and we don't need business analysts because they're programmers. They can put it in. They know what our requirements are. They've been here for years. So sloppy management, and we're looking at top management looking down. And of course, what happened down in the IT areas? They open up the door, and they see that little white light coming down the tunnel, and everyone panics, and what happens? People leave, and now you have the expertise you did have is now gone. This was a big one. Complex projects and cost.
Were they saying it was the customer always? The sloppy management and fuzzy management?
The customer?
Is that where they're
most of the
not on them?
Most of them. Yeah, but
they're looking at the problem of implementation.
Yeah. But at
partnership.
the same time, what I didn't, I guess I should have put this on here too, because I sort of included both. The vendors said, wait a minute, we're selling them multi-million-dollar systems, right? And we're taking their check, they're using our product. What responsibilities do we have to make sure that they put it in? Their attitude initially was, hey, if you're not going to pay my implementers and my programmers and my developers to come in to help you with your implementation, you're on your own. How many people have heard that before? You're on. And that was their attitude. However, it was causing a lot of problems. And now, I'm a capitalist, and I understand their attitude also. So they knew they were going to have to come to a fine line between being paid and not paid for certain support services. So, they get to fix it. Yeah, because a lot of the vendors are pretty sloppy too. Complex projects and cost. If you think about it, like for instance, right now, I'm implementing an ERP system. It's going to be going out to 40 states, and over 200 offices, warehouses. It also goes to Europe, it goes to Asia, so all around the world. Cost-wise, just in training is more than what people used to pay me to come into their offices to install a no-bill network. And I can remember when a complex system was, we're going to do 3 floors? Holy smokes, how are we going to drill that hole through the floor? So I mean, it was like, and there was always ways. So more complex, a lot more cost, which means what? Higher risk to the projects. Yet the vendors were still looking at it as if, hey, we're going to drop this stuff off, you're going to go into the server room, you're going to install it. they even slipped up on how complex the systems were. Arrogance. And the guy goes, well, I know my system really well, and I don't think it's very complex. And I was like, well, do other people know your systems? No, they don't. You know, and that was someone from JD that was sort of arrogant. The other problem was, and project manager, micromanagement with a focus on time and cost. And I work with a lot of project managers that they micromanage the project, and they try to be business analysts. They trust no one. They want to do it all. But just because you're a good project manager doesn't mean you're a good subject matter expert. So what was happening was a lot of these projects were being taken over by a project manager who would go, wait a minute, if we cut that analysis down from 2 months to 1 month, we'll save this number of dollars, and we'll be in even sooner, and it'll make us look even better to senior management. And guess what happened? They would have problems. So it would extend the project, drive up the cost. So they focused on this right here. Other problems, very common, poor project definitions, no purpose, no scope. People have said, well, this is an easy project. You don't need to go through all that definition. We know what we're trying to do. Unclear requirements for configuration goes right back to this one. And then this was the one that they said, some of these things are inherent in implementing a system. This one here, though, the lack of incomplete methodology use, is something that we can impact. So that's where the vendors started really getting interested, and in the solution that we're going to talk about. Other problems, disjointed and out-of-sync communications and information about the project and requirements, very common. You know, and I've been there before. Anybody do audits in here? You know, I love doing audits. When you walk in and you say, oh, this is the original request for the project, and this is the project closure document, and you're going, this doesn't even resemble what was requested. It's wandered, you know, and twisted and turned. So, out-of-sync communications. Poor and undocumented project artifacts. I'm working with a situation right now with that one ERP system where they would like to sort of migrate from one system to the other, but they've got zero documentation from the old system. So we're actually having to come up with the decision, do you recreate documentation for the old system and spend a lot of time discarding that, or do you just say, let's start all over and act like this is a fresh implementation, and we'll start the requirements from here forward, which is what they opt to do. SOX requirements. This is interesting right here. Anyone read the full SOX compliance document?
I've read a good deal of it.
Yeah. It's more than just IT, and it's more than just HIPAA, and making sure that people don't see what you're being treated for at the health department.
Yeah, more than just accounting.
Yeah. So anyway, not that you know, go health department. Anyway, SOX requirements. You know, what does this also state here? Executive managers that sign off on a large expenditure, you know, are going to be in trouble if that project gets blown. You know, and there have been more than one that did sign off, you know, and the project just tumbled down the drain and they lost their jobs. A couple of them actually went to prison. A couple of them said, well, I didn't sign anything. Doesn't make any difference. SOX compliance says you have to be aware of what's going on in your organization. You may, how many people try to get documents signed? You know, and you look for them, you know, and it's like, does anyone, like Howard Hughes, you know, they're never there, and they'll look at that document forever, never sign it, then it's lost, you know, with all the other signatures that you did get. So anyway, SOX requirements not being met, so audits are getting failing grades. A lot of these vendors went in, they took a look at these organizations, and they found out that there was a disjointed connection between senior management that's approving the money versus the system that's being implemented. Major item. Investor feedback. You spend a few $1 million for a system and get nothing out of it, the investors are not happy. They would prefer to have some type of return on investment. And the last problem is, and this is the big one, this is where the VAs are going to have their opportunities is, the problem was the same persons are not involved throughout the project from the pre-project, and notice I emphasize here, pre-project to post-project, which is after the system's on operations. So those are the, take off my jacket. You notice some people stand up like frozen robots. I tend to move around. The vendors took all these problems and they said, we got to come up with a solution that's going to work for everybody. It's got to work for the vendors. It's got to work for the customers. It has to work in the marketplace. And what might that be? Remember that one bullet that I pointed to about methodologies? That people weren't using them, or they didn't know how to use them, or they just avoided them. That was what they came up with. There's a lot of things, bad managers, you can't avoid, but the methodologies will work. So what they did was, they said, let's come up with a solution that will work. The first thing that they came up with was, what we will do, we will qualify customers, and if they don't qualify well as being capable and having the money and being involved, we won't sell to them. Well, as a salesman, I have a lot of problems with that. The investors have a lot of problems with that. You really have a challenge refusing a sale to someone. It's revenues into the company. So anyway, that was the first thing that they all said, yeah, well, that sounds like a reasonable solution. And the problem that you also have with it is that it opens up the market to bad performers. Other companies that have homemade systems or bad systems already, they will then swoop in, they will sell them, they will fail, you're right back where you were with bad publicity in the marketplace. So what they did, they said, we're going to take direct involvement with customers, and we're going to provide some type of oversight on the entire project, and it's going to start from initial inquiries about that product all the way to the project closure. We're going to provide a methodology to assist with the implementation, and what they're also going to do is, if they sold you the system and they gave you the methodology and you didn't use it, guess where they can point the finger? Not at themselves, directly at the customer. So part of the qualifying process today that's starting to occur more and more is that if you buy a large system